The day my brother died, something took his place. I was only 12 when Adam passed away. I remember his death with crystal clarity. It's my punishment for failing to save him. We were playing in the woods behind our house, venturing much further than our parents allowed when it happened. The incident that changed both of our lives forever. Hey Max, do you think gorillas could talk? You know, like, if they really tried 100%? That question still sticks out in my mind. Such an odd thing to ask, but he was only 10 years old, so I can't fault him for it. No, I said, staring into the canopy overhead. They would have done it already. Well, what if? Whoa, look at that, Adam shouted, pointing his finger. I looked in its direction, and I could immediately make out what appeared to be a ravine, a deep cut entrenched into the earth. To a couple of preteen boys, that was like discovering a new continent. Adam raced over to it without a second's hesitation. I followed suit, albeit a bit more hesitantly. Adam and I stood at the edge of the crevice, peering into the darkness within. It seemed deep, probably 30 or 40 feet if I had to guess. Even in the evening light peppering the ground through the trees, we couldn't see the bottom. Max, go get a rock. I want to see how... What happened next has haunted me for the last 13 years of my life. I watched helplessly as the ground Adam was standing on crumbled away. His eyes grew wide and frantic, and all the color drained from his face in the split second that the realization hit him. He desperately flailed his arms, searching for something, anything, to grab onto, but ultimately, he found nothing. I was such a coward. I was in so much shock that I couldn't move. I could only look on as Adam fell. If only I'd reacted quicker. If I had just snatched his hand in time, I could have saved him. Instead, I'm left with the constant reminder of my inaction. Time seemed to slow as Adam fell further and further into the depths. His scream barely registered in my ears before I heard it. That nauseating thump that still lives in my nightmares. Words can't express how horrified I was. Adam had been standing beside me one moment, then the next, he was just gone. Panic surged through me as the severity of the situation finally sank in. Adam, are you okay? I shouted, my voice shaky. I waited for a reply that I knew wasn't going to come. Only silence emanated from the crevice, until it didn't. I was about to run for help when I heard something. A faint, wet, ripping noise like flesh being stripped from bone drifted up from the trench. I stood, rooted to the spot. And then, just as quickly as they had started, the noises stopped. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest when a new sound broke the silence. Max! Adam's voice called my name. I should have been relieved to hear that, but I wasn't. It felt wrong. The inflection wasn't quite right, and the letters were spoken too far apart. It sounded like something was mimicking Adam, something that was just learning how to use his voice. I found myself unable to speak. I couldn't run, I couldn't scream, I couldn't look away. All I could do was keep my eyes glued to the darkness as a low scuffling met my ears. It didn't take long for me to realize what that noise was coming from. It sounded as if something was scaling the side of the trench, something big. And after what felt like an eternity, I was proven right. A hand grasped the soil beside my feet, finding purchase on the edge of the drop-off. Another hand followed, and soon, a head poked up from the abyss. I watched as Adam hoisted himself up, brushed the dirt off of his pants, and grinned at me. I can't explain how in that moment, but I knew with 100% certainty that the boy standing beside me was not my brother. He didn't look any different. No noticeable changes aside from a bit of smeared blood at the side of his mouth, but his eyes. There was a manic darkness in them that wasn't there before, like something sinister lurked just below the surface. What's wrong, Max? Why didn't you answer? I thought you left, Adam said, gazing at me expectantly. How? How what? Adam asked, cocking his head to the side like a curious dog. The longer Adam stared at me, the more uneasy I became. It felt as if we were playing a game of cat and mouse, and he'd back me into a corner. How did you climb back up? How are you standing here right now? I watched you fall. My blood turned to ice as Adam smirked at me again. It wasn't that deep. I didn't get hurt, see? He said, spinning around. I didn't have time to react before his body stiffened, and he turned in the direction of our house. It's getting dark. We should go home. And with that, he took off into a dead sprint, leaving me standing there to process what I'd just seen. Mom and Dad either didn't notice, or they chalked it up to Adam getting older. But I knew. There were too many subtle imperfections to miss. The way he ate all of his peas when he used to hate them. How he didn't put up a fuss when brushing his teeth, wearing his glasses when he used to abhor the thought. But the worst, most significant change happened at night. I was terrified to sleep in the same room as Adam. I had begged our parents to let me spend the night on the couch or on the floor in their bedroom, but they wouldn't allow it. Just the thought of being stuck alone with him nearly brought me to tears. I tried to avoid looking at him, to hide under the covers and pretend that everything was okay. I prayed that I would make it through the night without incident. But that didn't happen. I was trembling under the covers, trying to calm my nerves when I heard it. Something skittered across the floor. Then, I felt a presence looming over me. I can't explain how I knew that he was there. I could just feel him hovering, watching me. I held my breath, too scared to utter so much as a peep. And then he spoke. Warm, musty breath seeped through the covers and into my ear. It reeked of rot and decay, the smell of death. I wanted to gag, but I was frozen in fear as the words registered. I know that you know. Keep your mouth shut, and I won't have to hurt you. Then, he scampered away, back to his side of the room. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I was too on edge to let my guard down for even a second. Mom and Dad commented on how tired I looked, but I brushed them off. Adam was lurking in the background, eyeing me, waiting for me to slip up. But I was careful, and for the next month, it turned my life into a living nightmare. I was constantly exhausted. My grades took a nosedive. My relationships suffered. People noticed. Mom and Dad took me to a doctor, but he recommended more sleep and melatonin. That did the trick for a while, until the night that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was fast asleep thanks to the medication when something woke me up. I immediately knew what it was. I was paralyzed with dread the moment my eyes opened. Adam was standing directly over me. He wasn't whispering, just standing there, still as a statue. His expression was blank, and those eyes, they looked dead. Like the eyes of a fish, we stayed there for what felt like an eternity. Adam looming over me while I lay in bed, too afraid to even blink. Then, without saying a word, Adam dropped to the floor. I could hear him crawling, shuffling on the hardwood, but I couldn't see him. That terrified me more than anything, not knowing where he was. I wouldn't have to worry about that for long, because a moment later, his face popped up at the foot of my bed. Those cold, lifeless eyes held me in their gaze. I couldn't look away, even for a second. And just when I thought that my heart might explode out of my chest, Adam's face disappeared from view again. I could hear him. He was crawling beneath my bed. His nails scratched the floor as he dragged his body forward. I kept expecting his arm to shoot up from the darkness, for broken fingernails to rake across my flesh and choke the life from my veins. But that didn't happen. Instead, Adam stayed there, lying still. An eerie silence blanketed the room once again, and the only audible noise in the entire house was Adam's ragged breathing directly below my head. Then, a wet gurgle seeped up through the bed frame. "I'm going to come back for you someday. You'll end up just like him." I stayed awake for hours, those words rattling in my head, waiting for the moment that he would choose to end my life. But although my heart hammered harder than it ever had before, and the adrenaline running through my system was enough to put down a horse, I must have drifted off to sleep eventually. Because the next thing I remember, I opened my eyes to find Mom frantically shaking me awake. "Max! Max! Wake up! Where's your brother?" I groggily sat up, rubbing my eyes, until the events from the previous night came crashing down on me like a freight train. I trembled as I met my mother's worried gaze, and summoning all of my strength, I pointed down below the bed. Mom didn't respond. She knelt, leaving me holding my breath, shaking uncontrollably, expecting a clawed, gnarled hand to grab her at any moment. But it didn't. Instead, Mom's face began to turn red as she re-emerged. "Max, this isn't funny. Your brother is missing, and now is not the time for practical jokes." Those words, they were like music to my ears. I know how messed up that is. I know that I should have been concerned. This was my little brother. I should have felt some kind of worry or panic or fear, but I didn't. Instead, I felt a sense of overwhelming relief. They found Adam's body the next day. His corpse was lying in the trench where he'd fallen over a month prior. The coroner was perplexed. According to him, Adam's body showed signs that it had been deteriorating for weeks. The level of decay was too advanced for him to have died mere hours earlier. To this day, I still can't explain what that thing was or what happened to my brother. Sometimes it feels like a twisted fever dream, but I know that what I experienced all those years ago was real. And I'm convinced that whatever took over my brother's body that day is still out there. Last night, while staying at my parents' house for the first time in months, I visited the crevice. I don't know why I did it. I think part of me still needed closure. But that's not what I found. Because as I stared into the darkness, I swear that I heard Adam's voice calling my name from the abyss. Even now, it's inside my head, beckoning me. I know that whatever controlled Adam then has made good on its promise. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know it won't be long before I join it in the dark and let it take me. I used to go hiking a lot. I must be more cautious in the future, more respectful towards the woods and the creatures living in there. It was a nice day. The sun was shining and birds were singing. I called my friend, Edward, to see if he would go camping with me. He said yes, and we both agreed to go camping that night. I packed my bags and started my car. I picked up my friend, and we listened to music and had an amazing conversation. Edward was funny, and we had many things in common, but he was rich. I don't mean that it's bad to be rich, but for him it was. It made him act in ways I wasn't fond of sometimes, like he was entitled to everything and everyone must like him. That was one part where we differed. I tried to be as respectful towards everyone and anyone I'd meet. Edward was still a good friend of mine. Edward talked to me about this folklore he had been interested in. It was about some creature called Pukwudgie. He told me that they are small creatures who try to lure people to their deaths. He also said that they look like trolls, but have these spines in their back. Apparently, they also used to be friendly towards humans. It was an interesting conversation, as I love folklore. It's fun, mysterious, and you can imagine it being real. Time flew by as we talked about different urban legends and folklore. It was fun, and it made the camping feel really mysterious, like anything we talked about could show up. We reached our destination. It was a national park, and it was huge. We had been there before, but we decided to go set up our tent and camping area in a different place than before. We wanted to see something mysterious. The first night we spent there went well. We sat by the campfire, talked about different things, and had a really great time. It was like every other camping experience I've had with Edward. We decided to go to sleep and wake up early the next morning to go fish. That night, I woke up to noises coming around the camp. I heard this sniffing sound, like someone was smelling our stuff. I also heard this weird noise that I can't explain. It sounded like they were talking to each other, but it was not English or any human language. There must have been like 3 different sounds. I thought that some coyotes came looking for food as we cooked, and they could smell the food. I went back to sleep. I was woken up a while later by something scratching our tent. The next morning, I woke up and got out of the tent. There were these tiny footprints all around the campsite, and my cookies were eaten by something. That's when I remembered the noises I heard. "Did you hear anything last night?" I say to Edward. "I heard something scratching our tent, but I figured it was just a lizard or something," Edward answered me. He didn't hear the sounds before the scratching. We didn't think of what happened anymore and decided to go fishing like we had planned. We hiked to the lake near us, and we fished for a couple of hours. Edward catched a couple of trout that we kept. I swear that at one point I could hear the same talking type of noise I had heard the night before. I looked around, but didn't see anything. Our fishing came to an end, and we hiked back to our campsite. On the way there, I saw these small burrows beside the path. I saw movement in those burrows, and it looked like a porcupine was sleeping in there. It had these spines on its back. The next second I looked, it was gone. On the way back, Edward slipped into one of these burrows, and he got a cut to his ankle. We got back to our campsite and cooked the fish we caught. Edward patched that cut up, and then we ate. The fish was delicious. The rest of that day went by. We just sat at our campsite and enjoyed nature. We talked about that same folklore, and Edward said that Pukwudgies talk to each other, and also that they can disappear or appear at will. That raised my curiosity towards them. That night, I heard the same noises, but this time they were louder and sounded a bit angry. They scratched our tent more, and it was bizarre. I opened the tent's curtains and looked outside. There were these small creatures exploring our campsite. It was dark, but the campfire was still barely burning, so it gave a little bit of light. I could see their silhouettes and some other features, like they had small hands that had sharp claws. They looked like little trolls, but had human-like faces. They also had glowing eyes that I could see. I saw so many pairs of eyes that I lost count. I got spooked and closed the curtains. Then I tried to get more sleep. "Our campsite is trashed. Someone has been here," Edward shouted. I opened the tent's curtains and tried to see what's going on. I was not fully awake at that point, so I couldn't remember anything. I also got a little bit annoyed by Edward shouting. "So what if it is trashed? We can clean it up," I thought. He acted like there was some type of crime committed against us. I stepped outside and looked around. Everything was trashed. The campfire was stomped on, and the wood pieces that hadn't fully burned yet were thrown around the campsite. Our backpacks were all over the place. It looked like they were looking for something. We had a little bit of the fish left, so we ate that and then decided to go fishing again. "I gotta take a leak," I said to Edward. I looked around for a good place and decided to go behind this big tree. There were these same burrows around that place. I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but as I turned my head, there was nothing. Then I heard a big splash sound. I finished peeing and went back to fish. Edward was all wet when I got back. "You decided to cool off a little, huh?" I asked him while smirking. "No, something pushed me in the water," Edward said, and he sounded really confused. We decided that it was going to be our last night there. We had to stay one more night as the hike back was about 3 hours, and if we would have left at that point, it would be dark halfway through the hike. I caught a couple of fish we could eat. They were pretty small, but enough for the 2 of us. We got back to our campsite and lit the campfire. We waited for it to be perfect for cooking, and then cooked our fish. As we are cooking the fish, I start hearing the same noises. They were coming closer. "Can you hear that?" I asked Edward. "Yes, what is that?" He answered me. I told him I have been hearing this noise every night, and also told him the other stuff. "This must be connected to some kind of animal," Edward said while being calm. Edward's calmness calmed me down, as I almost started running around the place. I was terrified of those things. Then we heard footsteps approaching. They sounded small, but fast. I look around, and all of a sudden we are surrounded by these small troll-looking creatures. They had spines in their backs, and they had small hands with sharp claws. "These look like the trolls I told you about," Edward whispered to me. I nodded. They came to sit around us. They tried to steal the fish, but we didn't let them. We acted like they weren't there and just ate the fish. I gave them a couple of small bites to see if they would eat it. They did eat it, and I was amazed. How was it possible that people didn't know about this? Or they did, but no one believed the folklore. As we are eating, we hear footsteps again. This time, they sounded like the creature was much bigger. Then we see a bigger Pukwudgie approach. He came to sit with us and said, "Disturb wood. Go away." It sounded really weird and not human at all. I figured he must have learned that while listening to people. The creature seemed highly intelligent. "Sorry to bother you," I said. "We didn't know this was your home," Edward added. The big Pukwudgie then said, "Destroy home. You must pay." I started to wonder how we could destroy their home. We just camped there and picked up every piece of garbage that we saw. Then it came to my mind. Edward slipped to the burrow. Those burrows must have been their homes. "I'm sorry. We will do whatever is right to fix this," I told him. Edward looked annoyed, like he believed we could beat them up or somehow just leave. That pissed me off. Then the leader of Pukwudgies spoke again. "Do nothing. Give food," and pointed at me. "Must pay," he said, and pointed at Edward. "I'm not going to pay you anything," Edward shouted. He was a little bit spoiled. His parents bought him anything he wanted, and he could get off the hook every time, no matter what he had done. "Edward, you must do something. They will kill us otherwise," I told him with a shaky voice. He started rambling about, why should he pay for anything? The Pukwudgies started to make some noise, and it sounded really angry. Then they just disappeared. After a while, we heard footsteps and bushes rambling, but it sounded human. "Hello there!" some random dude yelled at us. I got scared and almost hit him. It was just another hiker coming to camp there. We talked to him for a bit and warned him to look out for the burrows and to respect the woods. Then we packed as quickly as we could and left that place. We were supposed to wait until morning, but Edward demanded that we leave as soon as possible. He was scared to death, as was I. We hiked through the woods and did not see anything unusual. We were 20 minutes away from the parking lot when we heard the Pukwudgies speaking again. It was louder than previously, and angrier too. They were coming for us, or at least for Edward. Then we saw them appear right in front of us. They didn't speak to us anymore, just stood there while angrily looking at us. We started running, and I got through them, but they stopped Edward. Edward was screaming very loud, so I stopped and looked back. They were carrying Edward back to the woods. I saw their spines pierce Edward's arms and legs. I watched them carry Edward to a burrow. Then, they just disappeared. The big Pukwudgie appeared to me and waved at me. I was too scared to go help Edward. I didn't want to go with them. I wanted to live. I got back to my car and drove off. I felt horrible for leaving Edward there and not helping, but how could I even help at that point? A few weeks went by and I saw a news article about people disappearing in that national park. There was a photo of the guy we saw just before we left. He disappeared too. I still think about why I didn't help Edward, but what is done, and life goes on. I should have trusted my gut the second we stepped off the main path. But when you're 2 hours into the middle of nowhere, with your best friend grinning like an idiot and saying, "Come on, it'll loop back," you go with it. Even if the trail looks like something pulled out of a nightmare, narrow, overgrown, and marked by little piles of bones arranged like cairns. Bird bones, mostly. A squirrel skull. Too clean, too precise. Probably just some creepy hiker thing, Kevin had said. But they were fresh. The trail wasn't on any of the maps I downloaded. It zigzagged up through dense forest, black spruce and larch trees leaning too close, their trunks warped like they'd been twisted under tension. The air was colder here, stiller, like something was holding its breath. I kept glancing over my shoulder. The trees looked the same every time, but it still felt like something was behind us. Watching, not moving, just waiting. "You good?" Kevin asked as we crossed over a fallen tree slick with moss. I nodded. "Yeah, just feel wrong?" Kevin just chuckled. Wrong's half the fun. But by the time we realized the trail didn't loop, it was already too late. We came to a clearing about 30 minutes later. Everything inside me screamed to turn around. The trees at the edge were dead, white, dry, bark peeling like old skin. In the middle was a wooden structure, low, crooked, like a hunting blind built by someone who had only heard about hunting blinds in a dream. It was covered in antlers, dozens of them, tied with sinew, woven together, some sharpened to points and stabbed into the soil like warning stakes. Kevin walked toward it. "Don't," I whispered. "Dude, chill. Probably just some weird artist's camp." But the thing inside that blind wasn't a sculpture. It was crouched, tall even while hunched over, bones sticking out under paper-thin flesh. Its head was turned toward us, but it didn't have eyes. Just pits where they should be, and a mouth filled with too many teeth. Blood-crusted antlers jutted from its skull like branches from a dead tree. Kevin froze. "What in the world is that?" I reached for the hatchet in my pack. My fingers didn't want to move. The thing hadn't moved either, but I could feel it. Like heat off a fire, like a migraine in the air. It exhaled. The sound was dry and long, like wind out over a grave. Then the screaming started. Not from the creature. From Kevin. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head, blood pouring from his nose and ears. His eyes rolled back. And the thing didn't even move. I grabbed Kevin's arm. "We need to go, now." That's when the bones around the clearing started to shift. Not roll, not fall. Shift. Like something was pulling them toward the creature. Like it was building something. We ran. I don't remember the trail back. I only remember the silence. The way Kevin wouldn't speak, wouldn't blink. Just walked behind me, breathing too slow. We found an old ranger station a few miles out. Empty, half collapsed. No signal. I've been trying to write this ever since. Kevin hasn't said a word. He just stares. Sometimes I think he's mouthing things, but I can't look long enough to be sure. We're not alone in here. Something is in the crawl space. I can hear it breathing when I close my eyes. I didn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired. My legs ached, and my eyelids felt like they were stapled open. But every time I started to nod off, I'd hear that dry breath again. Not outside. Inside. Somewhere low, close to the floorboards. Like the thing was waiting. Kevin sat in the corner of the station facing the boarded-up window. He hadn't moved in hours. Not since we first stumbled inside, and he collapsed onto the floor, twitching like he'd been hit by a live wire. Now he just stared. I had to say something. "Kev," I started, but my throat caught. I swallowed and tried again. "Kevin, what happened back there?" No response, just that slow, steady breath. I stood. My boots creaked against the warped wood. I walked toward him, heart pounding. I saw you drop. I saw you bleed. And then you just stood up and followed me like nothing happened. His shoulders twitched. Barely. Like a puppet on the edge of jerking forward. You said something in the clearing. Before we ran. What was it? Nothing. Then, his head turned. Not fully. Just enough to let me see his mouth. He was smiling. Not like Kevin used to smile. Not like the dorky grin he'd throw out before cracking a joke. This was wrong. Lips stretched too far. Teeth too white. Gums too red. I don't remember, he whispered. But it wasn't his voice. It used to be. But now it sounded thin, stretched, like someone dragging a recording through static. I backed away. I'm going to find help, I said, gripping the hatchet in my pack. There's a main service road a few miles back. If I can retrace our steps, you won't make it, he said. I froze. I never would have, Kevin added, smiling wider now. But it wants to see what you'll do. That's why it let us go. It's watching. My skin crawled. Every instinct screamed run. But I had to try. I had to believe there was a way out. I grabbed a flashlight, some granola bars, a flare, and the small compass I always kept clipped to my jacket. The bones on the trail had pointed in. Maybe they'd point the way back out too. I left Kevin in the station. I don't know if I locked the door behind me. The forest had changed. Not just darker, but it felt wrong. Like the shadows held memories they didn't want me to see. Branches clawed at my jacket, snagged my skin. The path we took earlier looked different now, like it had grown overnight, twisted in ways that didn't follow natural geometry. I followed the compass south. Every now and then, I saw those bone piles again. But they were rearranged, no longer neat stacks. They were shaped like letters now. Some of them spelled, "turn back." Others said, "feed him." The worst one was a bird skull lashed to a tree with strips of leather. Its beak pointed upward, toward the canopy. When I looked up, I saw it. Not the Wendigo. The sky. It wasn't sky anymore. It was watching me. No stars, just something enormous, sprawled between the treetops. Antlers too wide to measure. Skin that shifted like smoke. And eyes. Not eyes exactly, just voids. Pulsing in and out of my vision. I ran. I don't know for how long. Branches whipped my face. Something followed me. Silent but massive. My flashlight flickered, then died. When I finally stopped, gasping, trembling, half blind with fear, I realized I wasn't alone. There was someone else on the trail. A man, tall, thin, wrapped in rags and fur, his face hidden beneath a hood made of stitched-together hide. He didn't speak, but he raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned and saw a figure. It was Kevin, smiling.